Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, here to help you overcome disordered eating and find peace with food. So the podcast is going a little more informal for the foreseeable future. I am not going to be interviewing any guests for a little while. I'm going to be doing some solo episodes. It's going to be a bit more personal. I'm going to be bringing some topics in that I haven't talked about before. So if there's something you'd really like me to share, please do just get in touch. Also, if you are interested in working one-to-one with me, I have got some spaces coming up, so I would love to hear from you. You can get in touch with me at harriet.frew@gmail.com. And also, if you're not aware, I have got some courses, 10 Steps to Intuitive Eating and Overcoming Breaking Free from Bulimia. Both courses online. If you like online learning, I would really recommend you have a look at those. And that's the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. So today I'm going to be talking about how your thinking is fueling your binge eating. Now, this is something I very much relate to. I have recovered now from bulimia for over 20 years. Goodness, can't believe it sometimes. So it is possible. If you're out there and you're struggling, know that you can come out the other side of it. It really is possible. But often when we are stuck in these cycles of slipping into having huge binges, often our thinking around food is the thing that is driving it and making the behaviors even worse, but we don't even realize it. So I'm going to talk today about bringing awareness about thoughts, thinking styles into the moment so we can really become much more self-aware, address our thinking, and then actually it can help improve our relationship with food, because often it's not so much the food that's the issue, it's your thinking around the food. So first of all, a little vignette. 5 gorgeously doughy cookies sit seductively on the sideboard. Gemma's mum left them earlier for the family to share, and Gemma is trying to pretend they're not there. She thinks that she's eating too much sugar and she's intentionally trying to reduce her consumption. It's 4 o'clock. The children are fractured after school. There are squabbles erupting between brother and sister. There's dinner to cook and another child to pick up from club soon. Gemma feels irritable and overwhelmed as she juggles the different demands. She glances at the cookie packet. I'll just eat my cookie now, she considers. It will help me through the next hour or so. So within seconds, Gemma devours the cookie while simultaneously chopping vegetables and putting away the shopping from earlier. And she leans into the oozing deliciousness of it, lasting a few brief moments. But quickly afterwards, she's hit by a wave of guilt and negative thoughts flood her brain. I've blown it, so I might as well eat the rest now. I'm a failure. I'll never be in control of my eating. I shouldn't have these foods in the house. I have no willpower. Gemma feels hopeless and overwhelmed. And within the next 5 minutes, she has devoured all of the cookies and is feeling dejected and miserable. And you might well relate to Gemma's experience. I certainly did. Without even knowing it, faulty thinking could be sabotaging your bravest efforts to transform your eating. So, quick side note as well, that's very important to mention is before you completely blame your ingrained negative thinking, remember that if you are restricting your eating, so if you're not eating enough, you're delaying eating, you're cutting out food groups, then your thoughts around food are going to be louder, okay? Because as humans, we are designed for survival. So if there is a shortage of food, our brains just want to think about food all the time, even if we're not eating it. We're thinking about, you might be sort of scrolling for recipes on social media. You might be looking at cookery programs. You might be opening the cupboard door and seeing what's in the food cupboard, what you might be able to eat. So if you're restricting your eating, you're going to be thinking about food, okay? So it's important, I guess, first to address your restrictive eating, because of your numerous thoughts around food aren't just going to disappear if you are starving hungry, okay? So a definite way to reduce all that food noise, all those ruminating thoughts, is to take the courageous step of eating more, eating regularly, and eating a range of foods and working to keep blood sugar stable. Now, people are often really worried. They just think, oh, if I eat more, I'm just going to gain lots and lots of weight, and that's going to be really terrible. We get into this really kind of fight, flight, catastrophizing state of mind. But actually, if you eat more regularly, you start to stabilize your blood sugar. And I'm not talking about controlling blood sugar in an obsessive way. I'm just talking about having regular balanced meals, eating every 2 to 3 hours. Your body physiology will be so much more stable. And then emotionally, you will be in a much, much stronger place to deal with all your thoughts, your feelings, all the mood swings, all the stresses that come from living a life as a human being on this planet. So assuming that you've done that, or you're in the process of trying to do that, let's talk more about faulty thinking and the impact on relationship with food. Okay, so we have 60,000 plus thoughts per day swirling through your mind, and many being repetitive. And you can see from this the power of your thoughts to potentially affect your mood and behavior. So I guess we all have a slightly distorted view of reality. You know, if I had a speech bubble above my head and you could see all the thoughts that are coming through my mind day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, I'd probably be having a lot of thoughts about my clients, about my work, about my children, about jobs that need doing, about hobbies, I don't know. You would see different thoughts about all these different topics that are important to me. Now, if you have an eating disorder, you're going to be having a lot of thoughts around food and around body image, okay? Those thoughts are going to really sort of take over and dominate how you look at the world. So you can see as well that could be a little bit of a distorted view of reality if you are overthinking around certain things. In the same way, if I was kind of overthinking about, I don't know, really worrying about something that's going to happen to one of my children, and I was really ruminating on that and thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it, again, you could see that I could get almost in a rabbit hole of negative thinking. And another example, I guess, is someone who is really into football or a different sport. They might have lots of thoughts around the thing they're interested in. So the football fanatic may be constantly looking at when the next match is, replaying matches, looking at scores, looking at stuff on the internet. And, you know, if you could see a speech bubble above their head, then you would see a whole range of thoughts, probably predominantly around football. So I guess we all have a slightly distorted view of reality. And who's to say, like, what is a right way to think and a wrong way to think? You know, we're all very unique human beings. But I guess as you can hear me talking about this, you can probably recognize that for humans, getting caught in rabbit holes around certain thoughts is not particularly helpful. You know, I think for good, peaceful mental health, it's quite good to be thinking about lots of different things. You know, maybe as well, not to the extent where it's like really chaotic and overwhelming, but to be having an interest and a perspective on many different things rather than getting lost in kind of like, you know, rabbit holes of obsession. Now, of course, as well, if you are neurodivergent and you're listening to this, you may really relate to the fact that you can get hyperfixated on some of these things. So you've got an extra challenge, I guess, in like managing your thoughts and, you know, just probably being like just lulled down these rabbit holes even more than someone who is more neurotypical. Anyway, so the thing with negative thoughts is they often evoke intense emotional reactions such as anxiety, upset, guilt, or overwhelm. So if you're having a lot of negative thoughts, you're going to be feeling a lot of negative emotions. And then those thoughts and feelings impact your behavior and how you feel in your physical body. So unwittingly, you can become catapulted into patterns of emotional eating, restrictive eating, or overeating because of negative thinking. So let me just give you an example here. If you had the thought, something like, I really hate my body, I'm so out of control around food. So actually, let's use the second one. I'm so out of control around food, okay? Feelings that are going to come up when you feel out of control. Fear, anxiety, guilt, disgust maybe. Okay, now these feelings will impact your behavior. If you're feeling guilt, anxiety, disgust, you're probably going to try and restrict your eating, or you might binge eat to soothe, or, you know, you might be body checking. Behaviors will be stimulated by those thoughts and feelings. And then in your physical body, you might be feeling bloated, full, I don't know, skin crawling, just not feeling good in your body, wanting to jump out of your skin. And then this will create more thoughts. And we can go round and round in cycles. Now, if you are looking at the Substack version of this audio, you can actually look at my written article of what I'm talking about, and you can see the cognitive behavior therapy hot cross bun. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, you can go to my Substack. The link is in the bio, and you can have a look at the written article there. But it really is just a little hot cross bun diagram where I draw out the link between our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviours and our physical body. And if you can just imagine that as a hot cross bun and all of those things being interlinked. Okay, so let's now look at different types of negative automatic thoughts and think about how we can reframe our thinking in more helpful ways. Okay, so a really common thought pattern that you might have is all or nothing thinking. So you might have the thought, I'm either perfectly in control of my eating or I failed and I'm eating everything in sight. So you're either doing it all really well, or it's complete chaos, you've fallen off the wagon, things are terrible. Now, this is a very difficult way to have a peaceful relationship with food when you are constantly thinking in a very black and white way. So when you judge your eating in these all or nothing terms, the rules are often overly strict and unsustainable. It's like trying to hit the bullseye on a dartboard every single time. It's pretty impossible. And I think many people can follow an eating plan for a few days, weeks, or even months sometimes. But beyond this, you will likely crack and rebel against the rigidity of your expectations. So it's almost like if the pendulum swings too far one way, it's probably got to go back the other way. So it's very typical that people will have a period of time where they feel that they were almost doing their perfect eating, and then they fall off the wagon, and then it's absolute chaos, complete other extreme, just feels really out of control, really chaotic, really distressing, all of the things. So instead, work to be more flexible in your thinking whilst being kind and compassionate towards yourself. So what you're trying to do is genuinely permit yourself to eat a range of foods without judgment. Now, this is quite hard to do in the moment. And what you might need to do is have some helpful statements written down that you can refer to when you know you're going to be in a heightened emotional state. So things like, I don't need to overeat on this now, as I can have this food whenever I desire it. Okay, so what you're trying to do is create safety, peace, calm in your body. You say something else like, it's safe to eat this food and I have permission to enjoy this. Permitting foods intentionally is inoculation against binge eating. And I always love that one because I just think actually, yes, it's something we can all relate to, isn't it? When we think about going along and having an injection to protect us against some dreadful disease. They put a little bit of the disease, don't they, into our bodies in that injection. But actually allowing yourself to have some of these foods that you feel are bad, highly forbidden, etc., permitting them in intentionally is inoculation against binge eating. Now, I guess the important bit as well is saying intentionally, because I think if you're struggling with a binge eating problem, what you don't want to be doing is eating these foods at the cupboard door in a frenzied state of dysregulation, anxiety, fear, where you're not tasting the food, etc. So you need to really think about allowing them in intentionally. So if you're going to have a couple of biscuits or whatever, put them on a plate, sit down, be present, allow yourself to eat them, and then have your statements ready to give yourself some calmness and stability to manage the situation. So you might have to prepare the statements in advance so you are armed to deal with the inevitable anxiety, okay? And it's going to feel really forced and a bit difficult and a bit tricky to begin with, but honestly, it will start to make a difference, okay? You'll be starting to shift how you think about these things, to shift your subconscious thinking. And actually what will happen is over time, you will actually desire the food less when it's allowed, okay? And I say this as someone who used to feel like I would have called myself a food addict back in the day. I really would have done. If I had chocolate in the house, I had to literally eat it all, start again tomorrow with a clean slate, when I would go back to being like purely restrictive and being what I would have called good. And today my cupboard is pretty full of chocolate amongst other foods as well, but I don't even really think about it. I'm talking to you now and I'm thinking about it, but I was not really thinking about it until it's being brought into my consciousness. And because I am allowed to eat chocolate, I'm not obsessing, dreaming, thinking, planning about it all day, okay? Because I'm allowed at any point. It's not so special, it's not on the pedestal anymore. Okay. Number 2, in terms of negative automatic thoughts, shoulds. So things like, I should never eat donuts. I shouldn't eat sugar. I should be eating healthily. Now, of course, some people do need to genuinely eliminate foods from their diet for health reasons, and this can make your food relationship more challenging. So I'm talking here as well about perhaps people who have a gluten intolerance or a celiac or intolerant to dairy or something. I guess in those circumstances, because you want to be self-caring and look after your body, you may have to eliminate some of those foods. And I think that's hugely challenging. If you struggle with an eating disorder and then you have to eliminate foods for those reasons, it is very, very challenging. But for most people, banning a food completely is unnecessary and depriving, and having very, very strict should rules is not helpful. Now, having said this as well, it doesn't mean you have to eat donuts all day, every day. We're not saying that either. Because of course, certain foods will enhance your mood and energy levels, and you probably wouldn't actually wish to eat donuts from dawn till dusk. If I set you an experiment of saying, okay, over the next week, I want you to have donuts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or whatever food it is that is kind of forbidden or naughty to you, you might think on day 1, bring it on, enjoying the donuts. Probably by day 3 or 4, you'd be a bit like, maybe I'm kind of ready for a vegetable, maybe I'm ready for something else, okay? So actually, in reality, when we allow ourselves foods, it actually stops them being so kind of special and on that pedestal. And when we have these militant shoulds, it can feel very suppressive and bring on feelings of scarcity as well. If you're kind of always thinking, I should never eat the donuts, donuts are probably what you're going to be thinking about. They're what you're going to be thinking about when you're just kind of going about your day. So if you have a long list of foods that you're forbidden to eat, you'll think, yearn and dream about them more. And you may be more inclined to rebel against your shoulds and gorge on the banned food, because as humans, we are free-spirited people. We do not like having shoulds and being told what to do. We like to feel that we are empowered and we are making choices. So if you are shoulding yourself, you will activate your inner rebel, even if this is on a quite an unconscious level, and you will end up rebelling. Okay, so instead, you can still eat healthily, you can still prioritize health and look after your health whilst allowing in a range of foods. So different thoughts that you could start to assist yourself in developing this relationship with foods. Allowing myself to eat and enjoy this cake prevents me feeling deprived and helps me stick to my healthy eating goals. I can plan my eating in a self-caring and structured way without having militant shoulds. So again, you might need to write these statements down in advance so you've got them sort of on hand when you're in a place where you're really struggling, okay? There's so much power though in writing down these statements, saying them aloud, okay? You will start to shift the way you think about things. Okay, number 3, fortune telling. So when we're kind of predicting the future in a very kind of, anxious way, so we might think, I have no control ever around cheese. If I eat this croissant, I shall crave them all day and never stop eating. So if you feel that you have no control around a specific food, you've set yourself on the dangerous path where your predictions become truths almost, because you're almost setting yourself up. As human beings, the power of visualization is very, very powerful and effective. If we have to do a presentation and we're thinking ahead about it going well and stepping into an empowered place, we're engaged with our audience and, we're speaking confidently, etc. Actually, if you visualize that ahead and then you go into the presentation, you are much more likely to then present in a really effective way because you've already kind of lived it ahead already. So it's a bit the same with your relationship with food. If you are thinking ahead, oh my God, I've got no control around this, I'm just going to end up binging, it's just bad things are going to happen, it's really, really terrible, you are actually setting yourself on that path. Whereas on the contrary, if you actually visualize yourself sitting down, eating calmly, enjoying it, again, that can be really, really helpful too. So you can fortune tell in a constructive way. So believe that you're in control of your eating and collect evidence of this to support it through experimentation. So every time you introduce the dangerous food in a planned and safe way by sitting down at a table, savoring it, tasting the food, distracting yourself afterwards, showing kindness in your self-talk, every time you exert control in this way, it's a little victory to help build self-confidence, okay? Because that is how we start to build self-confidence and momentum, when we have a bit of evidence that is showing us that actually we can do this. So you can say things like to yourself as well, I am in control around food. I can intentionally choose foods I enjoy, balancing health and pleasure. Now, of course, you don't want to just be saying the thoughts here or saying the words here. You want to be setting yourself little experiments where you can practice this, so you start to build that evidence and confidence that this is true. Okay, so yes, good luck with that. Time for a short advertisement break. Do you feel trapped in an endless cycle of guilt and shame around food? Maybe you struggle with overpowering cravings or feel like your appetite has spiraled out of control. Perhaps obsessive thoughts about food, dieting, and your weight overwhelm you, leaving you without hope. The binge freedom method is here to change that. Grounded in science, eating psychology, and nutritional wisdom, this transformative book by nutritionist and disordered eating specialist Marcel Rose offers a clear path to freedom from binge, emotional, and compulsive eating. Through 4 essential pillars, nourish, balance, think, and feel, you'll discover the tools and strategies to stabilize your eating habits and overcome binge urges, with simple, actionable steps and real-life success stories to inspire you. Lasting change is within your grasp. And you'll also have access to a downloadable workbook and over 40 simple, balanced recipe ideas, plus a supportive community for ongoing motivation and guidance. So the binge freedom method is the ultimate guide to transforming your relationship with food and your body. If you're ready to end the cycle of emotional eating, binging, and dieting for good, your path to a happier, healthier life begins with the binge freedom method. So that's the binge freedom method. Links to both the book and Marcel's website are in the show notes. Highly recommend it. I was given the privilege of reading Marcel's book ahead and being able to kind of like input a little bit into that, just with comments about how excellent it was. I didn't have any input into the writing of the book. Don't want to mislead anyone there. Anyway, but highly recommend Marcel. And she's also was recently on my podcast, actually. So if you scroll back probably about 4 or 5 episodes, you'll be able to listen to that episode there. Okay, number 4. Another negative thinking style, surrendering. So this is when you kind of give up. Now, I think in many areas of life, surrendering can be a helpful thing. But I think in the context I'm talking about here, we're talking about it's like when you kind of give up and you feel hopeless. Okay, so a surrendering thought could be something like, I always fail at my healthy eating, so what's the point of starting again? I'm a complete failure, so there's no point in trying. Now, this kind of thinking saps all motivation and renders you powerless. Hence, you may abandon your goals, give up, and raid the biscuit tin. So instead, be your number one cheerleader. Whatever has just happened, put this behind you and see yourself as persistent and resilient as you continue onwards. So you can say something like, I learned from my slip-ups and I'm in the process of change. Recovery is not linear. And that's okay. I can still recognize my little wins and victories. I can stay hopeful and believe that change is always possible for me. Okay, number 5, discounting the positive. So thoughts like, so what if I followed my regular eating plan today? There is so much further to go. My stomach looks bloated and huge. Nothing is going well. Now, when you discount the positive, you don't see the mountains you've already climbed, and instead you're focusing on what seems like the Mount Everest top ahead. Of course, you're going to kind of feel overwhelmed and feel like giving up. So instead, recognize every little step and mini victory along the way. So every day I'm making progress towards my goals. I can change. One day I will look back and see how far I have come. Think about how you would talk to a child or a pet or your best friend. They were working on something hard and trying to overcome it. You would be relentlessly upbeat and encouraging and supportive and kind. You would not be running them down. And you need to do that for you. You deserve to do that for you too. Okay, the next faulty thinking style is labeling. So things like, I'm a greedy pig for eating the cake. I'm a hopeless, disgusting, horrible person. Okay, now unkind thoughts will absolutely affect your mood and motivation, and failing to show yourself respect can likely lead to self-punishing behaviors. And punishing body talk almost inevitably leads to comfort eating, to binge eating, to soothe the anxiety. And if you think about it, you would never talk to your dearest, kindest friend in this way, would you? You would be so much more respectful. So talk to yourself in a kind and courteous manner, as you would towards a dear friend or loved one, and avoid using discouraging names or derogatory labels. So things like, I'm learning every day and change is happening. My body has stuck with me through all the challenges. I may not be 100% happy with it, but it deserves respect and kindness. Okay, so I think we can often get kind of in this trap of being so unkind to ourselves, and then it just, saps all motivation. We just end up then eating to try and feel better, and it's just a horrible cycle. So you don't have to be in a totally body positive place, and really, we're not trying to sort of toxically positive yourself into a situation here, but you can at any moment recognize that your body does deserve respect and kindness, okay, as you would offer to any other human. Okay, and the last thinking style is wishful thinking. So things like, if only I was thinner, then people would love me more. If only I stopped binge eating, then my issues would all be resolved. So you put your life on hold until you reach the magic weight or body size. You fantasize that life will change when this happens, and that self-acceptance will finally be yours. Now, this is a myth. I've worked with so many people over the years who have kind of hung their hat on weight loss being the thing that's going to make them feel really good. And actually, every time people find they get to a certain weight, they feel like it's not enough, they need to go further. Yeah, it doesn't change how they feel about themselves. And I think, yes, you may get more external validation and approval from the world when you are in a thinner body. That is a real thing, and that is a toxic thing that we are living with in diet culture. But actually, external validation or comments from outside cannot plaster over you not feeling good enough and worthy from within. Okay, what we really are needing is that self-love, and also that deep connection with others. Validation is a poor substitute. It's like the icing on the cake. We want our inner cake to be solid. So instead, live today with acceptance and respect for the body you have. And this doesn't mean that you have to give up wanting to make changes to it, but actually offering yourself acceptance and just respect is so helpful. And the paradox is actually that when you begin to accept yourself as you are now, this is often when the magic of change happens. So offer yourself acceptance. I accept myself completely today. Okay, offer yourself that kindness, that wisdom. Okay, so a little bit more about how to put some of this into practice. If you're feeling like, oh my God, this is all really new to me, where do I even begin? I can't just change my thoughts, it feels overwhelming. Okay, understand, we have all been there. So the first thing is developing self-awareness before you start to challenge the thoughts, really. So if you feel like you have never really had any relationship to your thoughts, any awareness around your thoughts, the first stage is just beginning to develop that awareness before you can even begin to do the challenging. So decide, make a decision that you're going to become more conscious of your thoughts and to be open and questioning of them. Okay, thoughts are not facts, even though they feel like facts, because we attach lots of stories and emotions to them. So this is the starting point of change, and then potentially changing your eating habits for the long term. So what you could do is write out your negative thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and how you feel in your physical body. So Next time you have that thought, I've blown my healthy eating plan by eating the biscuit. Note how you're feeling. Maybe it's guilty, anxious, self-loathing. What's the behaviour that follows? Do you eat 10 more biscuits to self-punish? How do you feel in your physical body? Do you feel bloated? Does your stomach ache? What are the further thoughts that come? And you can kind of draw this out in that kind of hot cross bun of seeing how your thoughts, feelings, behaviours and physical body all interact. And it starts to give you awareness. And then you can probably really recognise as well, oh my goodness, I'm being so critical to myself. And actually, when you start to realise how critical you are of yourself, you can be so much more compassionate and understanding to yourself and just realise, no wonder I'm engaging in these really destructive behaviours, because my inner critic is raging. Okay. And then the second part is challenging those negative thoughts. So simply changing a negative thought for a positive one often doesn't work, because you'll often believe that the negative one is the truth. But instead, you can challenge the thought with reasonable evidence, and this helps access the rational side of your brain. So thought challenging can bring awareness to your current thinking styles. You can stand back and consider how you could look at the situation in a different way. So as I've said, it's worth remembering that thoughts are only thoughts, they are not facts. They may feel true, but it doesn't mean that they are true. And they're often an opinion which has been reinforced as truth by your confirmation bias, which we all have. And that's how you filter and interpret situations. So if you believe that everyone is judging your body, you'll be going out into the world looking for the evidence of that all the time. And if someone walks past you and happens to glance at your body, you will immediately think, oh my goodness, they're judging me. Whereas somebody else who doesn't have that confirmation bias wouldn't even notice. If they might just think, oh, that person just smiled at me. Okay. So if you believe something to be true, you will unconsciously find the evidences to support it and make it true. So to challenge our thinking, we can use some questions which come under the umbrella of Socratic questioning. So, and this is from cognitive behavior therapy. So you can think about, does your thought fit the facts? Is it really true? Okay, because it will often likely feel true due to past experiences and past interpretations of your thought. However, it doesn't make it true. So if you have the thought, this person is judging my body, if you really take a step back and look at that thought, you probably actually realize it's probably highly unlikely. Okay, now it might feel likely because of, maybe you had experiences when you were a small child where someone did judge your body, or someone at school said something really hurtful, and that's really stuck with you. So now you're kind of always on hyper alert for people commenting about your body. Okay, but it's trying to strip back all that noise and all those stories and emotional interpretations and try to look at something from a much more factual, rational perspective. The next thing is thinking about, what does the thought mean to you? So, for example, if you thought someone looking at my body is, I don't know, I'm feeling really, really judged by that, then if you thought, what does that mean to you? It might be something like, well, I'm just really not good enough, or I'm inadequate, I'm unworthy. There's probably some deeper meaning beneath that thought. And that can be really, really painful, because it can tap into our deepest beliefs about how we feel about ourselves. And sometimes we don't want to tap into those because it can feel really, really challenging. The next question is, does it happen every time? Is it always true? So you might think, actually, when I really think about this, in certain situations, I feel really vulnerable and as though my body's being judged. But then other times, I just completely forget about my body and I'm much more in the moment. So you can start to realize that actually, you think about things in different ways at different times, and that can start to kind of challenge what you believe to be true. Next question. What would I say to a friend who was thinking this? I think this is always such a good question. We're always so much more compassionate, kind, respectful to our friends than we are to ourselves. Okay, now you deserve that kindness, that self-compassion too, 100%. So I think if you haven't got time to do tons of thought challenging, often just look at that. What would I say to a friend who was thinking this? Another good question. How might you have looked at this situation before you became ill or had your current problems? So that can often be helpful as well, because you might think back to a carefree time where you didn't think about food, where you didn't think about your body, where you're much more in the moment. And that can be a good reference point just to help you think a bit outside the box and realize, goodness me, I didn't always think like this way. I didn't always focus so much on food and my body. I used to be so much more neutral about these things. And the next question, how would you like to feel about this? I think, again, that's a really helpful question because it brings a sense of optimism and positivity that actually it's really possible to think about things differently, because sometimes I think we just feel a slave to our thoughts. We feel that our thoughts are overwhelming and all-consuming, and we don't believe that we can change them. And actually, when we sort of do a bit of a zoom out, we realize, my goodness, I could absolutely think about this in a very different way, and that can feel very, very empowering. Okay, so the process of thought challenging, it takes repetition to gain results, as you will have been thinking in the old way for a long time. Okay, so I think if you think about if you were starting to go to the gym or to train for a race or something, you would have to do a lot of repetition of physical challenges to get your body conditioned and to be able to do things that you hadn't been able to do before. Same with like building those emotional muscles. You're going to need to repeat a lot to really get the results that you want. Okay, so I hope you found this episode helpful. Have a think about which negative thought patterns you relate to the most. Do share with me if you want to, if you've had any constructive experiences with challenging thoughts or not so constructive. I would really, really like to hear. And I think just be patient and kind with yourself in this process. It does take time, okay? But if you really commit to thought challenging kind of homework over the next few months, you can massively change your thoughts in such a helpful way. And I still use these skills to this day, not really so much around food and body image, because thankfully I'm in a pretty good place with food and body image these days, but there are other areas of my life where I'm always like fine-tuning, needing to develop more awareness, up-leveling my personal development, all of those good things. So I still use these skills a lot and find them incredibly helpful. And it is like an emotional muscle that just needs to be flexed again and again and again, so you start to gain confidence. Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If you're not following me already on Instagram, do seek me out at the Eating Disorder Therapist _ for further support with your relationship with food. Do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. And if you enjoy this podcast, I will be so grateful if you would follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.